What's going on, everybody? Time for us to get us a Princess Peach sip of, I'm such a geek, right? Sip of hot tea. That's actually not tea, that's coffee. I don't know what I was thinking. So anyway, happy March Mystery Madness still. I said, let me do this video before this storm, supposed storm comes in, and I can get back to reading what it is that I'm currently reading. So, which is, we'll get into that in another video. But, yeah, I am doing the March Mystery Madness Journey tag. I was tagged by a number of different people. But the creator is Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading. So I'll, of course, put a link to everything down below. Kelly's channel, and then, of course, the subsequent March Mystery Madness host. So anyway, I said this is a pretty decent tag. Well, they're all decent, but what I mean is this something that I can do, right? Something that I can really do. I have the tendency of overthinking, and so I have to kind of snap to certain things and not overthink things, and that prolong the process when it comes to making videos sometimes. So the first question is, what was your favorite experience, or excuse me, your first experience of reading a mystery? That's easy. That is super easy. My first experience of reading a mystery, well, when it comes to like elementary school, middle school, I did enjoy these. Probably not won't be categorically named a mystery, but I did love reading things like The Indian in the Cupboard. You know, it kind of scared me a little bit. One of my favorite books as a kid was The Egyptian Game. I've been trying to hunt down a hardback, if possible, original cover of that particular book, so I would love to reread that again. And then the Bogart. But as I got into middle school, that's when I discovered the Fear Street series by R.L. Stine, which previously I did read a few Goosebumps. But Fear Street was where that mystery nugget, that mystery seed, that genesis of my love of mysteries, specifically whodunits, really came about. And when you go to middle school, you discover cheerleaders. So I ended up finding or discovering the series per this cover at Walmart. You know, we're talking about 30 plus years ago, okay? And this is the third book in his cheerleader series, featuring a slew of murders surrounding cheerleaders and high school students through the culpability of a possessive evil spirit that goes from each body to body per book. But this is the third book, and I was like, wow, I know about cheerleaders. Here's a book that looks scary. I like scary things, paranormal things. And so I got this book. And then, of course, as time went on, I got obsessed. So this is the first book in the series. That's Bobby on the cover. The first evil, how all this evil generated itself. And then the second book is the second evil. And I think that's Corky's best friend, Kimberly, I think her name was. Kim. She had a really Kimmy kind of name. Then, of course, there's Corky on the third book. And then there is Cheerleaders the New Evil, which was a super chiller. I remember bringing this to Sunday school, and one of my Sunday school teachers was like, why is Santa Claus about to hit her? I was like, well, honey, y'all don't know outside of here. When y'all be reading the Bible, I be reading this kind of stuff. And then, I don't know what I was thinking. And then, and then I got this one, Super Chillers, The Evil Lives. I recently read all these books, probably about 7 years ago. I read every single one of these books. I feel like I'm missing one or two more. They are there. Trust and believe that. I have every single Fear Street book dating up to like 1998. 1998 is when I stopped reading these books. But I reread these books a couple years ago because the key element or premise is per book. You don't know exactly who is which cheerleader, but then the cheerleader team is possessed by the evil spirit. And I have got to say this, having read these in the span of, or not read these in the span of something 20 plus years or so, I have got to say the best one was actually the second book. This was the one that I thought was the most well done because of that whodunit factor of murder and chillers and all that kind of thing. And on the opposite end of that, I realized how these are not very good. They were not. They're not very good. Even though when I was young, this one was my favorite. I was like, no, this is the one. This is the one where R.L. really went to work. He really went to work on this one in terms of crafting a whodunit. One cheerleader possessed by this evil spirit. But that aside, when you think about when I talk about like the Fear Street series, they are, of course, teenagers being murdered, but they have these different categories or phylums. Some books are centered around a paranormal element, some are centered around like vampire, some are centered around like a ghost, some are centered around just like cursed objects, some go back into the past, and then some, which were always my favorite, were just the simple high school whodunits. Here is a gaggle of girls, and one of them is a murderer. There's nothing else, within all that other than just like your typical teenage, angsty, hormonal feelings of like envy and jealousy and, that sort of thing. Who stole my boyfriend? So, with that crafty whodunit edge to it. So, I pulled out some of my favorites, which was The Prom Queen. I remember reading this in 6th grade. Loving that, which I think they did a show about that. And Broken Hearts. Broken Hearts is, listen, Broken Hearts is so memorable to me. Having not read this book in like 30 plus years, only read it one time 30 plus years ago. Well, no, back then I probably read because I didn't have total access to books. Read it a couple of times, but the thing about this one that still sticks with me is who the killer was, specifically in the condition that they were in and the craftiness of it, and how they used the blade of an ice skate to murder one of their friends. So that stuck with me with that. And another one that I love is What Holly Heard, and this stuck with me after 30 plus years because of, if you can see that scarf around her neck, how her body was discovered, where the killer, of course, a high school student, strangled her with that scarf so tightly around her neck to keep her from telling secrets. So yeah, when it comes to the first question, obviously Fear Street was very much the seed, the genesis, the molecule, the mitochondria cell of my love of mysteries. So the second question is, has the reading of a mystery, ever startled you, and what was the book? And where were you when it happened? I did pull out some books. So one of the startling elements was E is for Evidence by Sue Grafton. Of course, my favorite mystery writer, though. She's overdue for a reread. And that's because of the ancestral factor that went into one of the plots, one of this B story here. I remember reading that and thinking I've never really come across that in terms of a mystery, maybe like in some contemporary fiction, and just being kind of rattled by that because I didn't expect it. Another one that I will say that kind of startled me is Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow. That is an amazing lawyer, legalese, murder mystery thriller genre book. I don't know why I say genre, but that was amazing to me because it really kind of boiled down to the last second before we revealed exactly who was the killer in that particular book, because it had to do with this lawyer who was having an affair and his mistress was murdered, and of course all pieces of evidence is pointed at him, but as a lawyer he has the capabilities of clearing his name, but there's a dilemma that he ends up coming across, or a conundrum that he ends up coming across toward the end of the book that you may or may not see coming. Me personally, I didn't see it coming. And that comes from being comfortable with certain books within the mystery genre that I didn't think that anyone would do it that way. But yeah, I would say Presumed Innocent. And what I was doing at that time, I was working third shift. I was laid across the bed just indulging myself. So I would say that. And like I said, I don't want to overthink this, so I have a host of different other ones that I would mention. One other is probably more than likely it's going to be Promises in Death by jdrobb. And I say that in terms of being startled at my emotional reaction at the end of the book because I shed a few tears. That book was so heavy for me. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to the third question here. So, are there any people that have played a significant role in your mystery reading journey? No. Other than being bought books by my mom, and maybe it's like on Christmas occasionally, nobody I know read mysteries, Well, I will say this though. As I spoke about my love of Fear Street, before Pokemon cards, we had Goosebumps and Fear Street books as Pokemon cards. So when my friend or friends would have, like, say, maybe a copy of this book, I would change it out. I would give her a Goosebump book in exchange for her copy of this particular book, just as an example. So maybe that could factor in, but other than that, no one ever read. I was like kind of like the only really hard reader in my life, in my family. A few aunts were probably readers as well. I know one of my aunts did read Stephen King, so no, not necessarily. Kind of yes and kind of no, but not something just so intimately, that I could, something so intimate that I could come up with and to share. But it was mostly just me alone with my books and trying to get a hold to them. So number 4 is, what is your favorite mystery and why? So this is another example of why I'm not going to overthink this, because we could be here for a while. I just off the top of my head, God, The Moonstone by Wilke Collins. Just about anything jdrobb, of course. We could be here all day. Another one is The Woman in White by Wilke Collins. A lot of the books that I read on the top 100 mystery novels of all times definitely are some very influential pieces of work that really shaped how I now read mysteries. Gosh, we could be here all day. So that's kind of too intense. That's a separate video on its own. So number 5 is, what mystery protagonist do you prefer, Marple or Poirot? I did a video a couple months ago about my re-energizing myself, reconnecting and re-energizing myself to loving reading Miss Marple books. And so far, I've read more Miss Marple than Poirot. But I will have to say, I did not have the same trouble with Poirot as I had with engaging with Miss Marple. So I'm going to say Poirot. At one point, I was saying his name wrong, but it's definitely Poirot. The Murder of Richard Ackroyd. I mean, like, it's got to be Poirot. So, number 6 is, what mystery do you wish you could read again for the first time? I was very intentional with this one, and I wanted to bring up how I would love to be reading When Death Comes Stealing by Valerie Wilson Wesley again. Blanche on the Lamb by Barbara Neely, the Blanche series. Dead Time by Eleanor Taylor Bland, the first book in her Marti Macalister series. And Mama Solves a Murder by Nore, DeLoach. And what these have in common is that they are all Black women mystery writers who were so there before the expanse of those particular writers that we see today. These are the ladies who did the crawling so the other ones can run, walking so the other ones can run. And when I look at this question and why I was so intentional with picking these books is because growing up, seeing the Fear Street books, you didn't see people like me in Fear Street. I can only think maybe on 1 or 2 or maybe 3 occasions on the cover there was a reference, or in the book, on the cover and in the book, there was a reference to a character being Black. Yeah, you didn't see a lot of that, and that's just how it always been. But having discovered these books is just like, there was that connection of, I'm very much familiar with this particular, you could say, the colloquialisms, if I said that right, the dialogue, the settings, the characters, the locations. Some of them take place in the South. And then having to watch these women characters who were very much like a reflection of the women that were in my life, Black women in my life, doing things like solving crimes, hunting down killers, solving crimes, confronting killers. I mean, that's just, it's almost like it was a whole nother world, but it was more like finally somebody put the key in the lock here for me personally and let me come in through the door of realizing that we can solve mysteries too, I guess you can say. So I don't want to ramble too long, but if I could read something and discover that feeling all over again, it would definitely be with these ladies here and a few others that I just couldn't bring everything in here. So number 7 is, what is your favorite adaptation of a mystery or mystery series? I don't watch a lot of TV, and I couldn't really think. I didn't feel like thinking too much about this particular question, but instead I want to share maybe just one recent example of what I did not like and what I'm looking forward to, or currently looking forward to. So this is not necessarily a mystery, but it has mystery elements to it. But it's Ghost Story by Peter Straub, about this entity that comes to seek revenge upon this small community. But the core or the premise of that has to do with these four elderly gentlemen who did something nefarious in their younger age. So hence why this entity is coming back and exacting revenge, taking them out each one by one until there's one. This book was freaking amazing. Okay, it was amazing. It was very rich with character, creepy, setting, all those elements. And so immediately after I read this book, maybe it was even the same night, I can't even recall, same night or maybe the next day, I know that there was never 48 hours between such, I watched the movie version and was thoroughly disappointed. So it just, having that, read this book and then jumped right into the movie, I had every single beat, it was that fresh on me, every single beat from the book in my head. So watching them do things like compress or delete one character to compress into another, delete entire story threads, delete some of the much more memorable and horrific moments that were present in this book not being present on the screen, especially in the face of just having this topless woman running around pretty much a good 20% of the movie. I was not impressed. But that's one example of why read the book first. Prefer the book. Now, with that being said, I am so excited because this year, two of my longtime reading series or favorite authors are coming out with TV adaptations, and I'm going to indulge myself. The first one actually happens to be Scarpetta, that just came out last Wednesday, and I have been watching it. I'm on episode 6 right now, so I got 3 more episodes to go, and I'm loving it. So as an example of what I do like, what I'm currently excited about, it is, Patricia Cornwell's Body of Evidence is one of my favorite Case Scarpetta books. Now, I know me and Patricia Cornwell, I wasn't feeling her last book, and I already addressed that, but nevertheless, having been reading these books for maybe about 16 or 17 years, I'm still here for her. I'm still here for her character, Case Scarpetta. So this is my favorite book in the series as the second book because it has to do with this writer who has been stalked by this crazy psychopath, and he ends up murdering her. But by the end of the book, I shed a couple of tears from this because the writer's ordeal was so grave, and it was just such a dire situation within the Body of Evidence. So yeah, I am excited about the adaptation of Scarpetta on Amazon right now, and I'm loving it, and I would definitely be looking forward to watching the next episode this evening before I go to bed because I gotta go to work in the morning. But equally as exciting is that before the summer, maybe May or even in June, Nevada Barr's Anna Pigeon series is getting an adaptation on USA Network. Anna Pigeon is a park ranger. Now, if you've been following me, you know that at this point, 10 years ago, I spent that entire summer of 2026 reading the Anna Pigeon series, with the exception of 2 books that I read previously before. And so I'm excited for the TV show adaptation that I pulled out 2 of my favorite entries within the series. The first one is Firestorm, where this is a closed circuit lock room mystery like you've never ever read before. So Firestorm is one of my favorites in the Anna Pigeon series, Park Ranger. And another one of my favorites is Blind Descent. This is, of course, a catastrophic read where our park ranger Anna Pigeon goes into, I think it's called Lechugulia, which is supposed to be Spanish for lettuce. Lechugulia Cave in Badlands, Nevada, something like that. It's been 10 years, y'all. Forgive me. But yeah, this is another one of my favorites within the series. So yeah, if anything, I'm excited about those 2. So number 8, do any mysteries intimidate you? If yes, what mystery or mystery series and why? No, not really. I'm not one to worry too much about the length of a book. I do have to read them in order, say there's a 10 or 8 books. I do have to read them in order, but I'm not intimidated by the length. That doesn't necessarily turn me off. I can't think of anything that really. I think the issue with me mostly is just wanting to get a hold to any and all mystery books that I'm interested in. Um, if I could just touch a book and soak it all up, and everything goes into my brain like Willow from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I wouldn't even want that because there is that lack of eyes on page intimacy that I enjoy as a part of the reading process. But my point still remains is that because I don't have time to be able to do that with every book that I'm interested in, of course, and as new things come about, the intimidating factor is really not that relevant to me. It's just a matter of me being able to get access to the book and sitting down and taking the time to read it. But off the top of my head, I can't really think of any book series that I find maybe intimidating for me to read. If it's so intimidating that if I do feel intimidated about reading a particular book series, then I feel like that's speaking much more to my like an insecurity of my own. So I can't handle it or whatever, or maybe it's too engrossing and too deep. And even if that is the case, I'm very good at just saying, okay, well, this is the reason why I don't want to read this. I'm going to stop at page 20 and move on to something else. Easy peasy. So number 9 is, what tips would you give readers hesitant to read mysteries? I don't really have any tips. I really don't. I'm one of the people live and let have. Do what you want to do. You can think for yourself. So I really don't have any tips. I honestly, I don't. I take people in as they are. Like if that's not your jig, that just isn't. I don't like people telling me what to do. So I don't know. I really don't have any tips. I mean, if I really think about it, I guess I would say find out. Every single book has a touch of a mystery to it. People would disagree. I say this because when you crack open a book, there's this premise that you're trying to explore, and along with that premise, there's an author who is delivering a question. And the only way you can get to the answer or the most conclusatory, concrete answer is by reading the book. Unsolving the puzzle of the book, whatever genre it's in. So if you want to read a mystery and you're very hesitant about it, take a moment to, explore what it is that the author is asking of you. And that will help with when it comes to analyzing the premise of the book. So if there's a book that is about a woman who has a yarn shop who ends up being murdered in a yarn shop, and you are somebody who likes to, knit and yarn, and you are curious, then maybe you should just ask yourself, well, how did this happen to this woman? Let me follow this premise of what happened to this woman, and what can I pick up in relation to the subject of yarning and knitting and crocheting that I can probably peel away from this mystery that might be beneficial to myself. Sometimes that's how I find myself discovering different authors who I might not ever read. Like I fell in love with Monica Ferris's Needle Shop mystery series because number one, I don't know anything about needle shop, but I was curious about it, and I just fell in love with it. Now, do I knit anything? No, absolutely not. I really just buy the thing already knitted, but nonetheless, that's what the pull was, just that curiosity. So curiosity may be the key word here. But if you are somebody who is not really into like anything, like you think something is too gratuitous when it comes to murder or gruesome, then just don't bother with it, I guess. But it really is up to you. There was a lady at the Goodwill store who asked me a question once. She was like, "How do you sit down?" We was in the book section. She was stalking. She's like, "I usually listen to books on audiobook because I can't sit down and just concentrate on reading the book." And she said, she asked me, "So how do you sit down and you just focus on what's in front of you in terms of reading the book?" And I said to her, to me, it's very simple. It's like a lot of things in life. You have to just want it. You have to just want it. And that's kind of my advice for a lot of different things. You have to just want it. So if you want to read a mystery, then you have to just want it. And you can make that choice and that determination if you want to go ahead and go for it. I invite you to it. Hopefully I give you a lot of recommendations, even though I don't like that word. So number 10, have you ever helped solve the crime or been part of something that sounds like it could have been in a mystery novel? Unfortunately, but not every single day for me is me solving other people's problems. From the biggest ones to the small ones. Every day is for me. Every day is a day of me thinking for other individuals in need or who need some kind of just something. And then stacking that on top of me thinking for myself and overthinking for myself. But no, I've never solved a crime before. I've never solved a crime. I've never committed a crime. And I was going to say I would be interested in doing so. I always wanted to kind of like be a detective, but I just don't think that I would have to be the kind of the person that's in the office that's not actually standing over the bodies or to the crime scenes. I would have to be the person who's kind of looking at the evidence, because that will be enough for me. My imagination will fuel enough for me as is. But, you know, those are things. If I was actually with somebody who was a police officer or detective, I'll be like asking a million questions. I'm very much like, I want to hear a story, so please tell me what you did at work today. So the last question is tag another booktuber, and I'll put all those links to those down below. And I thank y'all for tuning in. I don't know how long this is. I tried to answer these questions the best that I knew how. You know, I just did the best I could, like I'm always doing. Anyway, that's all, guys. Peace.